Good evening, class. We're going to spend just a few minutes, kind of coming down toward the end of the text, and we're going to spend a few minutes tonight. I've written down a few notes to kind of a review for chapter 7 through 13, which I think you'll find not only interesting but beneficial, especially if you pay attention to the video. And when we start out in chapter 7, we're talking about feedback, and the authors talk about feedback definitely not a one-way street. You can either seeking feedback, you can receiving feedback, you can give feedback, and a lot of these are challenges for leaders. And it doesn't matter which one of the three kind of pillars of feedback that the authors talk about. They do present an issue for not only experienced leaders, but especially individuals that it may be their first, rodeo when it comes to a leadership position. And they're basically, three feedback types. I guess the authors talk about them being orientation. You've got avoidant orientation. You've got performance prove orientation, and then you've got the learning orientation. Avoidant and performance prove typically are individuals, that fall into these orientation that are more along the lines of they're trying to filter out the negativity. They love hearing the accolades and the things that they've done well, but when it comes to I guess you could say critical feedback or feedback that you're providing them to improve themselves, improve especially their human capital, but improve efficiency, productivity, they tend to kind of zone out and not listen to you. Whereas the learning orientation, those are individuals that really desire betterment. And they use it to eliminate blind spots. Because if you're not going, if you're not taking feedback seriously, especially as a leader, how do you know that you aren't missing something? How do you know individuals out there feel a certain way about you? And when it comes to receiving feedback, and they talk about listening is extremely important, you listen actively. May ask a few questions, you're paying attention, you don't have your cell phone with you, don't have your laptop with you. Your focus is on that feedback session. Also, learn more, speak less. Don't cut people off at their knees when they're trying to give you information. And again, it's not a one-way street. You're going to have give and take whether you're receiving feedback or giving feedback. Again, pay attention, listen to what the individual on the other side of the table, let's say you're sitting across the table from them, listen to them, what they have to say, and focus on it. Don't make a lot of knee-jerk reactions. Don't get defensive. Just use it as a listening session and pay attention. And then lastly, and it kind of goes with the second, kind of step is, or the second kind of, I guess, listening as you're listening to whether you're either giving or receiving feedback, is to avoid, quick knee-jerk reactions. And it's really easy to do, especially if somebody's providing you feedback and they're giving you a lot of negative comments and a lot of negative feedback, and it's really easy to get defensive. And the flip side of that, when you're providing feedback for somebody, you need to, at least from my perspective, and again, I mentioned at class years ago, I had an HR person when I worked at HealthNet sat down with me and always talked to me that said, what you want to do when you're providing feedback is having some kind of a balance to your feedback. Start it out with the positive aspects. Here's what I have seen you. Here's how I've seen you perform. You've done really good here. You've done an excellent job here. And then follow up with maybe not so much negativity, but follow up with, and as I see how you performed so far, here's some opportunities maybe for improvement. Opportunities that maybe we can work together to help you improve. And then they get into, or the authors get into kind of the key steps of coaching. They talk about develop goals and communicate. And again, it's always worked well for me. I've always liked the black and white, binary, either you hit your goal, you don't hit it. And I like the meets goal and the exceeds goal and the stretch goal. And it gives you an opportunity to provide some differentiation among your followers. And it's always worked well for me. And, if you ever have the opportunity, maybe you want to give it a shot. Collect good data, analyze the data, and identify gaps. And then here's where it gets to the kind of meat and potatoes of it. You're talking about provide feedback, advise, encourage, kind of in the one-on-one coaching. But again, have a balanced approach to that. Get a verbal acknowledgement from the individual that you're providing feedback to, that they understand the situation, they understand the feedback, they're on the same page you are. And then lastly, put together a timeline of action steps. Especially detailed timelines, next steps. Maybe you want to, for the next quarter, you may want to meet with them, bi-weekly, or you may want to work with them or meet with them every week or not. But put together the steps so everybody's on the same page. And see, when they jump into chapter 8, they talk about team and shared leadership, and they go through a definition of, here's what a team is, here's what a group is. Groups are more like fraternities, sororities, church groups. Typically teams, you think about everybody focused on the end result. Think about athletic teams, think about the team that you have at work. And then they move from there into kind of the elements of team leadership. And one of the first things they talk about was, avoidance of the out-group relationships. And we talked in other chapters about the impacts of the out-group. You want to put together a team that's got shared values, goals, vision. You want to deal with the paradox of interdependence versus individualism or individuality. In individuality, it typically you think more along the lines of the United States, where a lot of individuals, especially in corporate America, are wrapped up in individualism. And then, if you compare that to Japan or some of the countries and, business units in the Far East, it's more like collectivism in the way they work together. One of the real aspects of kind of the elements of team leadership is whatever shared values, goals, or visions you develop and you implement. Hopefully you've gotten some preemptive buy-in, so you've included some individuals on your team and structuring these values, goals, and visions. But more importantly, you want to make sure that, especially if they're new, you want to make sure that the reward system matches up with where you want the vision and the mission and the goals and everything to head in that work directly. And then on the so individual, the problem with interdependence and individuality is you're kind of, as a leader, you're kind of walking a very fine line, because you want individuals to be creative, to show initiative, but at the same time, you want the team to work collaboratively together. So sometimes for a leader, and it is extremely difficult to kind of walk that fine line and make sure that your team is, somewhat have one foot in the interdependence and have one foot in kind of the individual or individuality or individualism, because that usually provides the foundation for a very good team. And then they get into the team illness, talk about groupthink, talk about free riding and social loafing, which I've always had some level of that with every team I've tried to lead in the past. And it, sometimes you just have to set people down and outline it and, make sure they understand exactly what's going on. Then they move into leadership and the 5 stages of team development. I'm not sure that as we said, when we I think went through the chapter, when we were, going through that as our topic for the week, I'm not sure I particularly adhere or particularly follow along these guidelines, but you've got forming, and that's where you set the ground rules and the visions. You've got storming, and that's where, you revise team leadership. You've got norming, and that's where you set the roles and and the norms and the values, and you've got performing, and that's where you facilitate change and new vision. And then you've got adjournment and kind of the lessons learned. And I've always thought that, at least the way it's structured with these 5 stages, that the performing and the adjournment were 2 of the most important stages, because especially, well, just like it when I worked at HealthNet, we'd spent a lot of time bidding on government contracts. And anytime you bid on the government contracts, the parameters almost seem like they change on a daily basis. And when you're in a team trying to develop that team, you want to make sure that somebody on that team, and you have to have somebody that's, that's responsible and accept accountability, is monitoring these changes on a daily basis and either reporting back to you or reporting back to the team. These are the changes. Here's what the new vision is, and we may have to tweak things along the way. And then lastly, as you adjourn and you kind of wrap things up, I've always seen a significant value in kind of a document that's lessons learned, because if you make some mistakes or something works really well, if you can get it down and on paper and socialize it around among others in the company, it seems to be a great learning exercise, and has always proved to be extremely productive and efficient as you move in maybe to the next grant that you're bidding on or the next government contract. And then in chapter 9, they move into diversity, and they talk about diversity as a fact of life, and it is more so now maybe than ever. They talk about the levels of inclusiveness, where you're trying to minimize differences, trying to moderate acceptance. You've got proactive inclusion. And I think a lot of individuals, especially, and I'll call old timers that have been in the system and been leaders for a long time, a lot of them fall into that, minimization of differences. A lot of them will kind of move up to the moderate acceptance, but you don't find a lot of the old timers that are those with a lot of experience in leadership. You don't find a lot of them in that proactive inclusion area. That seems to be newly minted individuals, with a college degree, maybe an MBA from somewhere. They seem to move more, and they seem to be more receptive for inclusiveness than maybe some of the rest of us as we go down the road. The benefits of diversity, they have benefits as a whole. You have, more in-depth problem solving, because you've got individuals banging at that problem from different mindsets. And again, if you've got a lot of diversity, you're not going to have to worry about groupthink. And actually, if you've got a lot of diversity, you don't have to worry as much about free riding and social loafing, because they will, jump on those individuals with both feet and either, drag them along or push them along, or they'll, come to you as a leader and say, we got to get rid of this individual because we need somebody that's going to step up and help us. You got a broad-based perspective and experiences. You're going to get experiences from maybe different parts of the world, especially if you're like one of the global leaders. And again, it minimizes the groupthink and to a certain extent, some level of social loafing. We moved into chapter 10, and to me, chapter 10 was one of the more enjoyable chapters, because they talk about expat and global domestic. And it used to be that if you were working for a global firm, you were pretty much guaranteed you're going to be an expat. So you were going to move, or you and your family were going to move, and you were going to spend, I think it's greater than 6 months outside the continental U.S. And now with Zoom and Teams and technology, it may be moving more from an expat into a global domestic situation, where you've got one foot in the United States and the other foot, say you're doing business in France or Germany or Italy or somewhere, kind of straddling the ocean there with, or maybe a foot in the U.S. and the foot in the Pacific Rim somewhere. And one of the things that they talk about, one of the most important things that they drive home, is before you take a global position, understand the American culture and the business context. And you have to understand it in detail, because if you can understand your own culture, whether it's United States or you're an individual from another country, understand your culture, understand your business context, because that's going to give you a leg up and make you more capable in understanding the differences between your own culture and business context and the new global culture and business context that you're going to be exposed to. To understand, again, they mention it multiple times, to understand other cultures, to understand your own culture first. Ways of doing business and problem solving. You have to understand that, because different cultures, I've dealt with individuals, especially on, with some of these TRICARE contracts that we had at Health Net, and even some of the work that I was involved in at United. You get some individuals that their thought processes, once you get outside the United States, their thought processes are really different. And somewhere in the text, and I probably should have written down the page number, but somewhere down toward the tail end of chapter 10, they compare Western culture with non-Western culture. And I think do a really good job comparing the differences in the Western culture and the non-Western culture. And part of those are, the Americans, we think along the lines are, problems are to solve. That's what those problems are there for. You get it in writing, because we're such a litigious environment here that even if you're dealing with somebody outside the United States, the first thing that comes to your mind is, whatever that agreement is, you got to get that thing in writing. It's got to be signed and executed by both parties. We think linear. A plus B plus C plus D gets you to E. A lot of other cultures, they just kind of mush it all together and it comes out the other end. It's like stuffing everything in a black box. And all of a sudden it shoots out the other end. It shoots out the results. So, that's just the mindset here in the United States. And that's the way that you're taught in college. It's just this linear mindset that we have here in the United States. We frequently delegate. I mean, a lot of countries, they wouldn't even consider delegating. We make quick, bold decisions. Think of all the cultures out there that it's like, what do they call it? Paralysis by analysis. They will analyze it to death because they are so risk averse and so afraid of making a mistake. And then we tend to help followers solve problems. A lot of cultures, it's like, you're the boss, you have the answer. I'm a follower, I don't have to solve your problem for you. So things are really different when you start going globally like that. One of the other things that we talk about, just in the United States, we have kind of a cultural looseness, kind of like anything goes, kind of loosey-goosey. We look at things as, change. People are, they can change, they can better themselves. We're more individualism as opposed to collectivism or dualism. We're more universalism as opposed to dualism or particularist. Doing is better than being. Time is money. So we revere and we value time in the United States. Some countries, go to France, go to Spain, France and Spain especially. During the middle of the day, it's like people get out and there's a lot of activity in the morning, and then there's from about 1 o'clock to 3 or 4 o'clock, there's not a lot going on, and then everything picks up again at night. The past, we think the past is, past is gone. That old, I guess it was Fleetwood Mac had that song. And the future is what's important to us, United States. Think about the price of the stock market. Stock investors are, individuals playing the stock market. They're not so much concerned about what the past is. They're looking at the future value of that particular share of stock or that particular piece of paper. And then you've got openness and directness. It just, things are just different once you get outside the United States. Global orientation, and they talk about the 3 things of global orientation. Global business know-how, again, know your culture and helps you understand the other culture. And that goes into the cross-cultural know-how. So if you understand culture and business, you're going to be a lot more successful trying to function in the business environment and the culture environment of the global economy that you're trying to function in. And cross-cultural engagement, um, I can't stress enough kind of the immersion factor if you go to a country outside the United States. Um, I've always been told that to learn a foreign language, you have to immerse yourself in the language. That's why a lot of colleges, especially, um, well, not even so much in the foreign language classes, but in the business classes in general, they like to send their students overseas for, if they like to send them for a year, but a lot of times at least for a semester, and they put them with the host family, and you immerse yourself in the culture and the business dynamics of that particular area. And then they kind of wind the chapter up and they say, avoid misinterpretations. And man, is that important? You be really careful with the misinterpretations and avoid cultural blindness. In chapter 11, they start talking about the essence of leadership is to be able to inspire. You've got hard power and you got soft power. Hard power is coercive. It's based on one's position. Soft power is kind of expert, personal sources of powers, personal sources of information, reverence. You want your followers to view you with with reverence. You want them to look up to you because of either your charisma or your knowledge or your expertise or your capability of getting things done, as opposed to taking a hammer and beating them in the head and getting them to follow you. And things that work either for a leader or a follower, when they talk about the influence tactics. You can use your base of power, but especially be clear about what you see. Communicate. Be focused and be able to communicate exactly what you want. And if you can communicate, it'll go a long way to getting what you need, either to do your job or getting that promotion that you want. You want clarity and directness. Some individuals, especially leaders, more concerned with, quid pro quo. I'm not sure I'd ever used quid pro quo in my leadership roles, but I guess in a lot of areas within the corporate culture, it works. I've always spent more time pushing expertise and information because, at least in the areas where I work, those were the two things that really help drive results. And then they get into the 3 I's of transformational leadership. First I was inspiration, compelling vision, purpose, individual consideration, talking about human capital, walk around the floor, get to know your followers. And then the last one was intellectual stimulation. That's more the cognitive approach. Sit down and work through problems with your followers. Challenge them when they come to you with new ideas or new information. And it's that thought process that is valuable for not only you as a leader, but valuable for your followers. And then they went through some survey results, and I think at the end of the day, they finally decided that when they surveyed not only the followers but the CEOs, that the shareholder-based values, you get better firm performance. It's more inspiring. You get more commitment. People willing to go above and beyond to help you. Versus economic values, it's kind of more autocratic. It's less commitment. It's definitely important. Economic values, don't sell it short. It's definitely important, especially as a leader. But maybe you don't want to make it your predominant approach to kind of the transformational leadership approach. Transformational leaders tend to use power to inspire, break down barriers for a team, increase human capital. They're more socialized than drivers by power for themselves. So, transformational leaders are more concerned about the team, more concerned about the company, more concerned about the organization, society in general, as some leaders that I think we've all had leaders that are more concerned about themselves. They want to lead because they thrive on the power, and they want everybody to know how powerful they are. Then they move into the goal of strategic leadership is to create competitive advantage. And this is extremely important. You hear economists talk about comparative advantage, competitive advantage. And again, at the end of the day, it's, can you do something more inexpensively, or can you reduce cost? Is it a better product? Is it better for consumers? Is it a price point that consumers are going to like? Are you maximizing the net benefit for society? That's your competitive advantage, and that's what the goal of strategic leadership is. Organizational culture, and they're talking about the resources of organizational culture. They need to be valuable. Not easily copied. You don't want your organizational culture copied by just everybody within the marketplace that you work, or within the industry that you work in. And it should be non-substitutable. And they spent some time talking about training is not a substitute for culture. Training is a supplement or help or complement for culture, depending on how you look at it. But good training programs helps get culture moved and gets it socialized within the company. Norms, values, beliefs should align with the firm's environment, or you're going to have a cultural gap. And that's the problem, and that's the function of a leader as they are rolling out these norms, values, and beliefs to identify any cultural gaps early on. Because if the observed behavior or the actual behavior is not the same as a desired behavior, then you've got a cultural gap, and you've got to manage that. You've got to start managing that right now. Organizational culture drives the decisions in the workplace and the behavior exhibited at work and social functions. Whatever your organizational culture is, you don't want to embarrass the company not only at work, but you sure don't want to embarrass the company at a social function. Norms, values, beliefs drive decision-making process for middle managers and individual contributors. And that's your strong culture. Remember, middle managers are more the ones that are going to be focused on the day-to-day operations. They're the ones that are going to have to socialize those norms and values and beliefs within the large majority of the followers within a company. And you definitely want individual contributors on board with that. Let's see what else we got. Oh, got Ed Shines. It was a nice little graph in the book, and I'd seen it before, that iceberg metaphor. The unobservable, I guess, the kind below the water. It's basic underlying assumptions and beliefs of the organization. Kind of the middle sections, the norms and values, the beliefs. It's you want to make sure you can trust your employees, and then up above, kind of at the upper level, it's the cultural artifacts, the symbols, the dress, the language. To me, it's the norms and the values. That's the one that, as a leader, you can probably make the largest impact as you're trying to move either a team forward, or you're trying to move a company or firm forward, especially if you're an entrepreneur. If you're an entrepreneur, your livelihood depends on not only your mission and your vision and your strategic thinking, but it depends on your norms and values and beliefs, and it depends on your ability to develop them and make sure everybody working for you or working with you understands where they need to be. Ed's approach, I call him Ed, I don't know him personally, but Ed Shine's approach, always to ensure that reward recognition component of culture aligns with the norms, values, and beliefs. And the text has gone through that multiple times throughout the chapters. Make sure your recognition and your rewards line up with the beliefs that you're trying to push forward. Let's see what else have we got here. To maximize the firm's competitive advantage is the ultimate leadership goal. You want to produce cheaper, better, higher demand product. Align the mission, vision, strategies, culture with the desire to maximize competitive advantage. That's your goal as a leader, trying to maximize that competitive advantage to ensure that your company is a market leader today, but also through your culture, make sure your company remains as a market leader. Shared ethical norms and values sustain competitive advantage. And I think that's pretty straightforward. When developing mission vision pitches to followers, make them compelling, make them short, make them simple. Remember what I talked about? The plaque I've got that my professor gave me in graduate school? KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. And if you follow that, it doesn't matter whether you're working on a graduate degree, trying to write your dissertation, or you're trying to pitch a new mission, vision, strategy. Make it simple, make it direct, make it understandable, make it compelling, and something that you as an individual can communicate to the individuals that you're trying to win over with your new approach. Culture should be a mechanism to ensure the pursuit of mission, vision, strategies that will achieve competitive advantage. Again, multiple times throughout the text, they are talking about mission, vision, strategies, how the rewards match up to it, how it impacts the company, how it impacts competitive advantage. And then they talk about, change to, resistance to change. I thought it was pretty interesting. It pretty much is held true for the companies I've worked for. You got the 1/3 rule. A third of them, they're just going to jump on board. They either love change, they love the chaos associated with change, or they just like you as a leader and they're just going to fall in line. You've got a third they're going to be kind of the fence setters. They're going to wait to see if you're serious and, what the outcome's going to be. And then you've got the third that, they're not going along with anything. And in the text, they talk about there's a bad and there's a worse. And in that 1/3, the bad ones are not going to undermine. They'll go kicking and screaming. They're not going to undermine your change or your new statements or your new values that you're trying to implement. You'll eventually get them to move on. But those that fall in that worst category, they are the true resistors. And at some point, you're either going to have to take them into a room somewhere and set them down and talk to them, or you're going to have to sit down with HR and help get them out. Either get them out the door or move them into another area in the company that it might be a better fit for them. The fence setters tend to be pushed along, and the fence setters you will. Eventually, you'll get them to fall in line. You may have to work hard at it. With the fence setters especially, a lot of those individuals are driven by reward and recognition, and you want to make sure they're all aligned with the change that you're trying to implement. And it probably helps to give them a voice in the process. Let's see. And I think the last kind of, to wrap it up, you had Kotter's 8-step, approach to organizational change, and you had the 3-step approach. You can kind of take them for what they're worth. The concepts that they pitch are very valuable concepts, but you have to go through the steps and work them exactly that way. I think you develop your approach to organizational change for what works best for you. And I probably tend to lean more toward the 3-step because it's unfreeze, and that's where you have the compelling reasons for change. You've got the change itself. You've got a reasonable plan for implementing the change, and then you've got the refreeze, and that's one of the most important ones because you don't want any backsliding. You've spent a lot of time developing the strategies and developing the process to change. You've implemented the change, and now you want to make sure that it is embedded in the organization's culture, and you don't want it to slide. You don't want it to start backsliding. And there's another example, another opportunity to make sure that your recognition, your rewards are aligned with the change. And also when you're setting up the norms and the goals. Make sure those norms and goals are aligned with the change, so in turn you can align them with your rewards and recognition. And that's all I've got as far as a review. If you've got any questions, you can reach out to me. Otherwise, that's going to finish us up for this section. See you soon.